Hello and welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. I'm your host, Ronojoy Sen, a senior research fellow at the Institute. We are in the midst of the Football or Soccer World Cup, with the group stages winding down as we speak. Despite the tournament having expanded to 48 participating countries, we are also once again in the all too familiar situation of no country from South Asia, including the world's most populous nation, India, with 1.4 billion people being present in the World Cup. Indeed, none of the countries from the region, which make up nearly a quarter of the world's population, got within touching distance of qualifying for the World Cup. At a time when the Caribbean island of Curacao, which is a tiny speck on the world map with a population of 156,000, yes, you heard me right, has qualified, football fans in South Asia are bemoaning, or at least should be, the absence of their respective countries. And they will be left rooting for countries like Brazil or Argentina, as they have done for the past several World Cups. To talk about the perennial absence of South Asia, particularly India in the World Cups, we have two speakers who are veteran observers, and here I'm not using the word by any means to signify their age, but point to their enormous experience of Indian sport and football. Gautam Bhattacharyya and Dhiman Sarkar. Gautam Bhattacharyya began his career in Kolkata's Telegraph newspaper before covering sport for the Economic Times and Times of India, where we had incidentally overlapped for a few years during my time as a journalist. He has spent over a decade with Gulf News Dubai as sports editor and later as a senior associate editor. He's also the author of Leander Paes, Portrait of a Never Say Die Indian. Dhiman Sarkar has been a sports journalist for over 32 years, 26 of which have been for Hindustan Times, a multi-edition daily. He writes mainly on football and has been incredibly to 4 World Cups. He also writes a weekly football newsletter, Kickoff. Welcome to the podcast, Gautam and Dhiman.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Right. So let's sort of begin with some history. It is fairly well known, and something that I had mentioned in my book on Sport Nation at Play is that India's only realistic chance of participating in the World Cup was back in 1950 when it had received an invitation to participate in that year's edition in Brazil, but apparently had to turn it down due to lack of funds. This had come on the back of a spirited display by India in the 1948 Olympics. Subsequently, India was the first Asian football champion in the 1951 Asian Games and famously won the gold medal in the 1962 Asian Games in Jakarta by beating South Korea in front of a hostile crowd. Perhaps, and I might be corrected here, the last major medal won by India on the global stage was a bronze medal in the 1970 Asian Games. So, why was the decline of Indian football so steep after 1970? Maybe Gautam, do you want to sort of go in first?
Yes, I can. See, the thing is, as you rightly pointed out in your introduction to the subject, that this has become a kind of quadrennial lament, as I call it. And every time we go back to the 1950 episode, when we thought that there are a number of theories actually. One is, of course, lack of finance. The other one is, of course, we want to prioritize on Olympics. Possibly that's another reason. But yes, I mean, this decline has been steep but gradual, and there is nothing that we have done, to kind of arrest it. Not when, see, at least 2 cycles back, we heard that there's going to be an increase of 16 teams at one go. So what did we do? We did nothing. So unless you cross the hurdles, one at a time. I mean, first, you don't qualify to participate in an Asian Games. You don't qualify to I mean, the Asian Cup, twice we did very well to qualify on the trot. Third time we fell miserably. So unless we cross these earlier hurdles, the World Cup continues to remain a mirage for us.
Right. Dhiman, any thoughts on the sort of historical decline since, roughly 1970s onwards?
Yeah, I mean, I do have an issue with the decline because, that decline kind of presupposes that we were really good at one point in time. I am not taking away the fact that India did win the first Asian Games gold medal in football. or the fact that they won it in 1962. Now, but if you look at the history of the sport, it is a period of maybe 5 to 7, if I'm being a little charitable, 10 years, where we were a force to reckon with, maybe on the continent. Okay, now, um, but so that really doesn't, to me, it doesn't qualify as decline. I mean, decline is, let's say, Hungary, okay, not being able to make the World Cup from playing 2 World Cup finals and coming close to winning it and beating England 6-3. To me, that is decline. We were never really very good. We had India were fortunate to have a group of players born around the same time. Not that India did much to sort of create that pool of talent. Uh, and together they, with a very good coach, again a happenstance situation, they punched above their weight on the continent for some time, and in the Olympics in 1948, 1956 for the first Asian country to make the semifinals. Now, and 1960. So I'm not very sure about our India's position as a football as a country that took football seriously, as a country that took playing football seriously. We followed the sport forever. We
Correct.
continue to follow the sport. I am not very sure we have ever been serious about how to go about this business of being at our best, which explains why we are where we are, because the world has become serious about football and we've been left behind, or we are pretty much like uh, I think it's in through the looking glass. You're running to stay still, essentially.
Right, right. Yeah, that's an interesting point that India was never really good. And as you mentioned, there was that sort of brief moment in the early 50s, late 40s, when you had, I guess, coach Abdul Rahim, and as you mentioned, a set of
Right.
very talented players,
Right.
which then led to, the brief. Of course, the fact is, whatever it is, India was, as you rightly mentioned, in the continent, in Asia, uh, at least one of the leading nations till 1962, and the bronze in 1972, 70 meant that India was still somewhere up there. So that kind of leads me to the next question. What are some of the reasons, and I know this is a big question, for India to languish in the FIFA rankings, currently placed at a lowly 138, if I'm not wrong, where some of the
Yeah.
other nations, like South Korea, whom India beat way back in 1962, countries like Japan, and of course the West Asian countries have all so dramatically moved ahead. And of course, the other South Asian nations are doing even worse if you look at their FIFA rankings. And I think India was last in the top 100 in 2023, if I'm not wrong, before again slipping back. And Gautam, you ended a recent piece in BBC with this line, and I quite liked it. If Curacao can do it, why can't India? And some blame it on India's obsession with cricket, but I don't think that is a good enough reasons. Any thoughts on that from um, both of you? Who would like to go first?
Gautam, you go first.
Yeah,
See, I think that it's a fact that after that so-called golden generation from the 50s and 60s down to the 70s, then there was a time when others also started playing catch up. I mean, it's a very bitter pill to swallow, as Dhiman says, that were we really that good, or there was an exceptional generation of the holy trinity of PK Chuni Bolaram, and subsequently we had in the 70s team. I mean, few of them are still, we are fortunate that few of them are still alive, and they become equally cynical, like whether it's a Sham Thapa or a Syed Naimuddin, they have become cynical about the subject.
right. I guess Shamtapa was in the 1970 team, right?
70 team, yes, yes. So the thing is, I mean, how seriously did we take football? Could we draw enough kids? I mean, even see, this is, if we refer to our childhood, the kind of enthusiasm where middle class kids, lower middle class kids came out to play football. So numbers, you always need numbers, call it at the grassroots level or wherever you will, to get a quality out of that. So now I think, I mean, it's a kind of better late than never thing. I mean, now AIFF is talking about this grassroots development program. I mean, we can talk about it for hours together. So we have seen uh, two of these academies emerging over a period of time. One is in Bhubaneswar, another one is in Hyderabad. But for them to produce the results, I think Dhiman can talk a bit about the selection process there. But to produce the results, it's going to take another good 10 to 15 years. So there has been a kind of gradual degeneration, as you said. Then the Kolkata League, like the 80s and 90s. I mean, these are times which has been romanticized a lot. But believe it or not, just to give you a cue, like the Calcutta League became a 90-minute affair from a 70-minute affair after I joined the profession. I think it was sometime in the early 90s. So that tells you a lot about, it goes a bit about demythifying the standards that we were talking about. What we had was, the enormous passion and fan following, the 1980, the Eden disaster. These are the things which we had. But in terms of a football nation, we had stopped growing. And then, of course, there are other reasons as well. How we have got, how the regional tournaments, which were held with much fanfare, they started collapsing. Teams went out of business. They lost interest. The corporates lost interest. So it's been a downward curve for at least the last 10 years or so.
Hmm. Since you mentioned, if I turn to Dhiman, you mentioned academies, and I recall, I guess when I might have been in college, probably late 80s or 90s, but I might be getting the chronology wrong, that the Tata Football Academy had started, and there was a lot of hope invested in the TFA. What's the situation with that? I believe they have a team, right? But they're not producing the kind of players, or any thoughts on the TFA?
No, the team, the academy exists, and it, like you said, it is part of the Jamshedpur football team. Uh, but well, it's like this. The rankings at let's start with the rankings. The rankings are an algorithm that can be gamed. Okay, now you can play a couple of matches against teams who are above you, but who are not sending the best teams, etc. And you can very easily get back into the top 100, etc. But that is no sign of progress. Rankings is at best an indication of the kind of football you can play. Rankings do not say, because North Korea, for instance, barely play football. They do not participate in international tournaments, etc. They'll beat the daylights out of most teams in Asia, but the rankings would be God knows where. Okay, so it is not exactly. I mean, the rankings again it's a bit like the GDP. It just gives you an idea, but it hides as much as it gives you out gives you. So that's one. Now, to everything that Gautam said, what also happened was, and here again, it tells you how serious we are about football. What also happened was in the 70s, because of the political turbulence in Bengal, the then chief minister instructed the All India Football Federation to not take players from Bengal for international assignments. So you had the Surojit Senguptos and Sham Thapas, who were obviously playing in Bengal because this is where football existed, and this was the Mecca of football in India. But they were not allowed to go for national team duties, essentially because the idea was you can keep people away from violence by distracting them with football. At least that was the thought. Now, that also set us back significantly, because if you're not doing well internationally, you keep sliding, and as you keep sliding, you lose interest in wanting to do it better. So there was a point in time where there was very little to be had by playing for your country, and these people were stars, at least in Kolkata, and then they go out to represent the country, and then the result is an embarrassment, so it becomes a problem. So that also added to the slide. Now, again, so it tells you how serious we were or how serious we were not about doing well internationally. We were comfortable in playing domestic tournaments. We were comfortable in Mohun Bagan beating East Bengal, etc. And we were very happy. It was like living in a well. Either we didn't know enough and wanted, which is why we didn't know when the world bypassed us, or we didn't want to change. I mean, and truth could be somewhere in between. So uh, from the 70s, I think that also kind of affected us. And as Gautam pointed out, the rest of the world started taking football a lot more seriously. Now, we always need to understand that in most of the world, football is the number one sport. So whatever resources that they can generate, a lion's share of those resources will go to football. Now, India, even in the 70s, was in a situation where we played some cricket, we played some hockey, we played some football, and then in the 80s, suddenly a Prakash Padukone emerged. We did not have a sport that kind of identified us as a country till 1983, after which there's been only one sport that identifies us as a country. So we never really focused on developing a sport in the 70s, in the 60s, or whatever. And then we came to a situation where cricket, we became world champions in that sport, and obviously all the resources would go towards that. And like you rightly said, I do not think cricket is the problem here. The problem is, as a country, we are not serious about football. And which is fine, really. I mean, there really is no reason for India to be serious about football, except for the fact that it's a huge opportunity for soft power, except for the fact that, it is the one, you get to go to a thing like the World Cup, which is possibly the planet's most significant sporting event. But it's okay. We don't care about football. We are where we are. And that, I think, is the sum and substance of the problem that we're looking at.
Yeah, that sort of leads me to the next question. And some aspects of which have already been dwelt on, is how much of the blame is to be placed at the door of say the Indian Football Federation, AIFF, or the Indian state. And we know there are problems with state-led growth, as we have seen in China too. And or do we sort of have to look at more sort of sociological reasons as to why kids don't play football, and then they and the game doesn't develop? I know both of you have dwelt on aspects of that, but if you have any further thoughts on that issue.
I think, like I said, if you get children involved in football, as in participate in football, you will get results. Now, I understand there are problems and it will require government help. We will not be able to do it otherwise. There are enough and more models of how government help has improved the football stature of a country. Morocco is the most obvious example because the World Cup is on. So what we need to do, I think, is improve the national team, because that is your biggest asset. How do you improve the national team? You can go about the Japan way, which is earnest organic development that lasts 30 years, 35 years, costs a lot of money. Or you can go the Indonesia way, or let's say the Curacao way, which is tap into your diaspora. That is a shortcut. Now, Curacao, for everything that is being talked about Curacao, and no disrespect to them, they are in the World Cup not because of the people who live in that island. They are in the World Cup because they were once a colony of a European footballing power. And they have tapped into that diaspora to be able to get players who are pulling on that shirt, but who don't stay there. Half of the Morocco team do not stay in Morocco, were not even born in Morocco. So while we evaluate the progress of those countries, we need to take this into consideration. That is not something India allows as a country. Indonesia almost made the World Cup. Almost. They are till a year ago, they were way behind even India in the rankings. but they almost made the World Cup by tapping into the fact that they were once the Dutch East Indies, and players from the Dutch second division, lower first division came and played for Indonesia. They appointed Patrick Kluivert as their coach, and they made it to the third round of the Asian qualifiers. Next World Cup, they'll possibly be there. So it is not as if there's been a holistic, organic development of football in Indonesia. What they're hoping is that if the team keeps going to the World Cup, there will be investment, there will be interest, and then you can grow the sport. So if India can try to do something like that, that is the shortcut. Or India can be honest and say that we have to put in a 50-year program like Japan had, with their resources, with their integrity, with their kind of honesty.
Right. Yeah, very interesting points. And actually, that was one question I was going to touch on later, but maybe I'll turn to Gautam, the question of the feasibility of getting players from the diaspora, as Dhiman mentioned. Indonesia has done it. Morocco has done it. Morocco, much of the team is actually, the diaspora. And of course, we find, I was looking at a survey, somewhere done by someone that, Africa, besides the African nations that are playing, has, almost every team, especially from Europe and even elsewhere, actually teams who are of African origin. So Gautam, any thoughts on this model, whether it's feasible, whether it's even ethical?
Yes, yeah, ethical, yes. But the thing is, it's up to the government and the national federation to decide which is the roadmap which they would like to follow. And I don't think they're very sure on the roadmap. I mean, if we are talking about sports passport now, because the thing is, if you want to get a OCI, I mean a player of Indian origin to play for you, they have to, as you know, as per our rules, they have to surrender the passport of, say, a Qatar or a UK passport and then come and play in India. The question is, why would they do that? Because we are, as it is, we're inferior in terms of rankings. That lowers their exposure. But this is a route which I think now the AIFF is pursuing out of desperation more than anything else. Because if you look at the three or four areas in a football team, we don't have strikers or goal getters. So that's where that's a hole they're trying to plug by ad hoc. There is an Australian striker who played a few qualifiers, the AFC qualifiers for us. So, but that is a very ad hoc measure. And secondly, where is that bank of talent which the African nations, or as Morocco, Dhiman was pointing out, where are they? I mean, in this World Cup, there has been a fair bit of media buzz around the 4 or 5 players of Indian origin who are playing for Qatar, then one for Australia, another one for Congo. But where is the talent pool that you're getting? Unlike, what happens is whenever an African country or a Caribbean nation, they do well, they surprise us in the World Cup, we go back and discover that, well, I mean, the big, large amount of the diaspora are playing a second tier league in France or Germany, like that. Even most of Iran's players, they play in Bundesliga generally, I mean, by and large. So where is that bank of talent whom you're going to draw on for players of Indian descent? I doubt whether there is. So the other option left before you is that long-term plan. Now the long-term plan hasn't worked. And it's only now that the government is talking about adopting a sports policy. Now the sports policy largely talks about government control of sports bodies. But if I'd like to pick Dhiman's brains on it as to how many pages or how many words have been devoted on the growth of football per se, because once again, so that we have an answer ready by the time the next World Cup comes, and before the lament begins, we say that this is what we have got to show. So I'm not too sure that the picking up players from the diaspora is a long-term answer to plug some holes. Yes, but we don't have that kind of numbers which a Morocco can afford, or any of the other African nations or Caribbean island nations can afford.
Right. So you have, of course, problems with the model itself, but as you're saying, there's a practical element that the talent pool of diaspora Indians vis-a-vis football is limited, and of course, compounded by the fact that why should these players or anyone else be willing to give up their passport to sort of adopt Indian citizenship, which is, of course, would be a big deal for those footballers.
That's right. They're talking
Right.
about a sports passport, but in very nascent stages. So we'll have to see
Right.
how it works. But even
All
then,
right.
it's not going to give you the numbers.
Right. Right. So very quickly, since we don't have too much time on our hands, to turn, we've already talked a little bit about, and Dhiman talked about, the storied clubs in Calcutta with their, sort of long and rich history. We all know about, Mohun Bagan, way back more than a century ago, winning the IFA Shield by defeating a British regimental team, etc., etc. But if we sort of move to the contemporary, the current day situation, uh, eh, why do what are your thoughts on the, sort of the tournament, the domestic tournaments, the club structure, and its inability to really produce world-class footballers, even though we are attracting, foreigners from abroad, maybe not of the highest quality, perhaps, but we do see, foreign players playing in India. What do you think ails the club structure in India? Dhiman, I know you follow
Lack
this
of
very closely.
investment. I think no, there are no easy answers here, but lack of investment. Again, I think that is the single biggest problem. Uh, Lack of investment. We have not been able to look at a situation as in our clubs have not been able to look at a situation where you can invest beyond the first team. Now, historically, uh, how have clubs learned? So India has been playing football for 200 years or whatever, and for the longest time, when we had organized football, we invested in a first team. We did not invest in grassroots. We did not invest in youth teams. We didn't even know about these things. Now we do know about it, but we don't have the resources to invest, and we do not have the resources to invest in infrastructure and the resources to invest in youth. So what we do is we essentially whatever money that we can generate for a football club can generate or attract, it puts the lion's share of that, if not all of it, into building a strong first team, and that's where it begins and ends. Now that is how football used to be played close to 100 years ago. Now the world has moved on. World has been able to generate more resources primarily because those clubs matter. Now, in India, as I keep circling back to this, football does not really matter, which is why we've not been able to change or we've not had the resources. I mean, there's a club in Malaysia called Johor Darul Tazim, if I've got the name right. Now, Malaysia is not exactly a football superpower, but this club uh, has put in serious money. They've got Luis Garcia, formerly of Liverpool, and also who's played in Kolkata, uh, as their technical director. They are regularly competing at the Asian Elite Champions League. Now, if you continue to do that, then even if your national team is not doing well, you have something to root for. Now, and England may not make the World Cup, but the Premier League continues to be the world's top most watched league. So similarly, if we had a Mohun Bagan or an East Bengal with that kind of investment who were doing well in Asia, then we would have had a reason to follow, support football, and be interested in it. As we have, what we have now is a lot of history, some of it glorious, but beyond that, we really do not have much. And which is why we are not being able to produce players. Even now, the Mohun Bagans and the East Bengals are not really looking beyond the first team, although club licensing criteria has mandated certain youth development teams that have to be done, but that they are essentially ticking boxes. So that is why we are not producing players.
Right. So I guess, nothing succeeds like success. So
Yeah,
if
yeah.
if you have a sort of role model, either even if it's not at the national level, but for a national team, yeah, that of course has its own benefits. Gautam, any thoughts on the club structure and why it's really failed to, produce, world class, even sort of continental level, sort of players.
Yes, I mean definitely around the league structure, or the what is being now branded as the elite league of the country, that is ISL. There is a lot to talk about because it had been working towards short term gains. I mean, I think we took a step in the right direction when in the mid 90s, I think it was around 96, when then the erstwhile the president of the All India Football Federation, he wanted to zero in on the J League model, and hence we had I League starting here in
Hmm.
96. And if you look at
National
the
League, then
start
it
of,
became the I League.
yes, the National League, which became the I League. And at the beginning of this new millennium, we were not doing too badly. We had the odd, 1-0 win over UAE with Baichung Bhutia's generation prospering. This kind of results to boast about. But that league gradually, I mean, that league also didn't grow. And what we had in 2014 was another watershed moment, whether for the right or wrong reasons. We had the ISL, which was marketed better. Initial years, you had a lot of overseas quality professionals, bit of been there and done that kind of players who came. So there was a glamour quotient. Once it started wearing off, I mean, have you? I'm not sure if there is any other serious league in any other football playing nation where there is no relegation or promotion. So you can't possibly expect too much out of that. So that is number one. And number two is definitely the youth structure not being followed seriously in any of these teams. Once in a while, we see some news coming up. But if we ask that, well, player X has come out of their youth program like a Messi did from Barcelona's program, yeah, no comparison here, but just name one or two who has kind of excelled and gone ahead to wear the national colors, who is a product of the junior system. So definitely there's a problem and a lot of work to be done there.
Right. So I guess there are, yeah, plenty of problems with the, both the, how the clubs are structured in terms of, youth or grassroots development, as well as how the tournaments are also being organized. I guess we could go on discussing, issues around, clubs and the state of Indian football. But to move on to another topic, is India's football fans. So of course, any country that's well in football also has to have not only fans but also people, fans who then also take to the field to kick the ball. In fact, it's a source of wonder and some amusement outside of India. That is that Indians follow countries like Brazil and Argentina so passionately in places like Bengal, Goa, Kerala, where you can see cutouts of the likes of Messi and Ronaldo on the streets. Any thoughts on that? And how do we sort of see this phenomenon? Does that have why that also does not sort of playing to sort of really getting onto the field playing football, or is this culture just restricted to really being couch potatoes and watching others play and celebrating in their wins?
Ronojoy, I think it is true that you would want to uh, follow or support the best. Okay, now television has opened our eyes and given us access to the best of football, uh, and that has kind of changed dynamics. Okay, so you can see Ronaldo, you can see Messi, you can see uh, b- football, elite football all through the year. So that gives you a connect. Having said that, I think this is pretty much a worldwide phenomenon. Now, look at Qatar, for instance. Okay, uh, they have a lot of money. They are serious about sport. They are investing in football. So why does Nasser Al Khelaifi invest in a PSG?
Hmm.
He wants to win, right? He wants to win the Champions League. He has seen that if he may be investing the same amount in Qatar, but that Qatari team is never going to give him the kind of mileage or a place on football's high table that PSG now does. So look at the American owners of Premier League clubs. Why is it that they're investing in Premier League clubs? This is across the pond. They should have been investing in soccer back home. They are a decent football playing country, as we have seen in this World Cup. So I think it's pretty much the desire to be associated with the best. And in this case, if Messi is the best and if Ronaldo is the best, I would support either Messi or Ronaldo, whatever. I think the other reason also is that when we started watching the World Cup from 1986, we've been watching pretty much every match of the World Cup. That was when Argentina, so 1986 was Argentina's World Cup. Brazil has been a historic favorite. Brazil is pretty much everybody's second team. So because we don't have a team, Brazil is the first team for a lot of us. Argentina works because of Maradona. It continued because he kept coming to India over time in the aughts and even after that. And then you had Messi. So a combination of being able to watch football, which has given a combination of having access to the best, and the fact that Argentina was a first memory of winning a World Cup, etc., and Brazil being everybody's favorite, is why I think the support for these two countries come. And I do not really see this as a surprising phenomenon because, like I said, it is pretty much a situation of wanting to be associated with the best. There would be people in India who would have favorite Hollywood stars. There would be people in India who would have a favorite French filmmaker, right? Not because India doesn't make films, but because that person may think that that guy is the best. And that's how it is, which explains why, as I said, the number of American owners in Premier League clubs, or the number of West Asian owners in Premier League clubs, or clubs in Europe.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting explanation. Yeah, I mean, you sort of jogged my memory, and maybe that gives away my age, but I recall seeing very grainy images of the 1978 World Cup through sort of Bangladesh television.
Not live here. Yes.
Yeah, that was Mario Kempes, Passarella, and that crowd. And then, of course, 82, I think we were able to see a few of the games.
Yeah, semi-final onwards.
Yeah, semi-final. And then, of course, 86 was really where you're right. And that opened a window literally to another world.
Absolutely.
Whereas before that, we are, of course, all from Calcutta with our tribal allegiances to, Mohun Bagan, East Bengal, or whatever. So that was really our world. And yeah, and Gautam, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, see this craze, I would slightly differ with Dhiman, because you see, I mean, what is happening with these Gulf owners, I mean, whether it's a Khilaifi or whether it's a Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed, I mean, what I have experienced firsthand is this, one is that soft power angle, number one. Number two is it gives, I mean, there had been a tendency in the Western media when this takeover started happening that they would be referred to as oil rich, fund flush. This kind of prefixes would sit with the owners. Now that is now gone, and we have come to a stage where the axis of power and ownership has started shifting ever so slowly towards the Middle Eastern owners, and that is primarily with the same reason why Saudi Arabia had a Ronaldo, because they were eyeing this 2034 World Cup. So it's a bit of legitimacy, soft power, as well as business sense. If you look at the kind of the revenue or the valuation in the stock market that Manchester City would wield. Here it's been cult driven, as Dhiman says. I mean, it initially before our generation it used to be Pele and Pele only. So that explains Brazil. From 1986 onwards, it explains Maradona, and then there have been the two camps. You see a more wilder expression of this if you look at the following in Bangladesh. I mean, where there would be frequently riots if Argentina, Brazil run into a collision course. So that's what, but then there is actually nothing wrong in it. And also what's happening is with the club football taking over our consciousness, the exposure is now round the year. So I think today's Gen Z, I mean, say from 18 to 25, unlike us, they are more equipped about finding out which Spanish player is delivering what in his league and stuff. So maybe it will be slightly more evenly spread moving on, since the exposure to the club football has also increased among the new generation.
Right. I think we could, of course, go on and on discussing this issue. And as Gautam Bhai rightly mentioned, hopefully this does not become again, this sort of what you very rightly called a quadrennial lament. But hopefully, some of this enthusiasm, both at the fan level, as well as some of the interests expressed by the state corporate structures. There is a move in every sphere to sort of make India a global power, and maybe some of that might rub off on football in India. Thank you, Gautam and Dhiman, for sharing our insights on South Asia Chat. You were listening to South Asia Chat. To learn more about our work, please visit us at isas.nus.edu.sg. You can also get updates through social media. We are on Twitter or X, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. South Asia Chat is also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you.